Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I'm Anne, and I am so excited for our conversation today and for our guest, who is one of our regular contributors and blog writers. And you may have heard him previously on the podcast. I'm here with Edward Luersman. Hey, Edward, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, Anne. So good to be here. How are you?
I'm doing great and really excited for today's topic. You know, our theme for this month is work. It's the month of March. And of course, we think about St. Joseph the Worker. And so we thought that talking about just this idea of work in general would be really fun and interesting for our listeners. And we want to cover different facets of work, of course, our professional lives, but also, work that we do in the home, maybe work that we do out in the community as volunteers or within our parish, and all different facets. But for today, we want to focus a little bit more specifically kind of on our professional lives and the work, the jobs that we go to every day, and particularly how we navigate maybe some of the challenges that come up in our professional lives when we are in a season of infertility or loss. And on the surface, it may seem like, well, what's the connection there? But we know that there are some struggles that we can come up against when we're in this season, when we are working with our coworkers and different events and announcements that come up at work. So, Edward, let's start off with maybe you can just talk about some of the common struggles that we might encounter in our work life when we're in a season of infertility or loss.
Absolutely. And first, let me just start out by saying this is purely anecdotal based off of what I've personally experienced, what my clients have experienced. So I'm going to list off some things that come to my mind, but I invite our listeners to really think about what particular experiences, what particular challenges that they have personally experienced. So, with that being
Yes.
said, with that being said, um, I think several things come to mind, but the first thing is just a lot of the painful reminders, the painful pricks of the heart that we experience in the workplace when our own infertility grief comes up because other people's lives, other people's experiences. And I think it is common for people to experience that pain when other people in the workplace announce pregnancies or gender reveals or talking about the day to days with kids or kids in their lives, things like that, and that can really bring up an absence that we perceive in our lives. So first
Yeah.
off, just think about how many reminders we can have in the workplace, um, and kind of tandem with that is the lack of ability to really join in on those kind of conversations, even if it's just the day to day talking about T-ball or picking up the kids from school, blah, blah, blah. It's, you know, what do I have to contribute to that conversation? It can be a
Right.
real thing that goes inside our heads. So that was kind of the first thing that I thought of, those two things.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, it's reminding me that we talk in this ministry a lot about the experience of infertility and also loss as being so isolating, and we feel both exposed and hidden at the same time. We're hidden because we don't really talk about it, and but we also feel kind of exposed because it's really obvious. That we don't have children, or perhaps with secondary infertility, we just have one child, and so I think that that in some ways can be magnified at work, can't it? Because we're with these same people every day,
Mhm.
and we sort of get to know a bit about each other's lives, or people ask questions, about our lives, and so I think it can become, uh, even more difficult in some ways to navigate that. And I'm thinking about if we're in a particularly tender season, maybe we're trying to conceive and the treatments are kind of wearing us down, or we just received a negative pregnancy test, or there's just some real tender part of our hearts right now, and then we receive those announcements. Or maybe, coworkers are throwing a baby shower for somebody in the office. So, what are some of the ways, maybe first of all, how can we manage kind of our own emotions in the course of a workday and kind of hold it together? Because we won't get any work done if we're bursting into tears every 5 seconds, or running out of the office. So maybe talk a little bit about first, ourselves and how we can kind of manage those emotions.
Yeah. So there's kind of two things going on that I think of when you ask that question. And first off, it's, is this a situation in which you are discerning how to respond? And there's an active choice on that part. So that's kind of one consideration to think about is, can I afford to take some time to think about how I'm going to respond? Or is it one of those spur of the moments where you're on the spot and you have to just like congratulate that person,
Right.
or decide whether you're going to say something about that insensitive comment. So that's one thing that I want to think about. But two, I think even more fundamentally, it's important to go down to the basics of emotional regulation. Recognizing that in these kind of moments, you have a flood of emotions that are coming in. That may be stress, that may be that despair, or that devastation, that grief that we feel because of our infertility. Or it could be anger, right? It could be frustration, irritation that, here I am again in this predicament. Here I am again being reminded of this painful reality that I'm trying to distance myself from, or I'm tired of feeling. And so you're going to have this flood of whatever emotion it is coming in. And so you have to be aware of the fact that, hey, like, I have to get through this moment, whether I like it or not. I have to respond to those emotions in some way, and hopefully oftentimes our goal is to be more discreet, to try to kind of
Right.
recollect ourselves, respond in a calm way. So I think it really goes back to the basics of if you can't afford to, take a deep breath, try to tell your nervous system that you're okay, even though it's okay to feel upset right now. Your brain is taking this as a threat, and so it's going to start responding in a very quick and manner. So going back to that, saying a quick prayer if you can. Can you break away? Can you pause? Like, is it something that you just shut your mouth and just say, I don't want to like say something that I'm going to regret, so let's just like hold it there? Or can
Right.
I at least muster out something just like, I'm so happy for you, congrats, and again kind of like putting that emotion just away just a little bit until you can let it out and sift through it later when it's a more ideal time to do so. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that advice. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about, I mean, these are sort of things that we can use not only in our work life, but just in, other situations where we may be, I guess, in a way blindsided perhaps by an announcement. Maybe we're not expecting to hear it from someone. So, it might be perhaps helpful for us even ahead of time, not knowing when such announcements might happen, maybe to have a couple of answers ready, or almost like just creating this little I think about like the disaster response plans that people have, right? Like they pack up, they have their water in the first aid kit and that sort of thing. So maybe we can sort of create a little emotional disaster plan. That's not a good word for it, but I think you know what I mean. To just kind of prepare us ahead of time for those kinds of things. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what sorts of things could we have in our little emotional response kit that we can help us to prepare for situations like this?
Absolutely. And I love this idea, Anne. And I've actually had this conversation with clients before, where they're like, I know that I'm going into a situation where either I suspect that a pregnancy announcement is coming, or I suspect that an insensitive question, or there's gonna be these topics that are gonna come up because I know the situation with these people, that this is what I'm gonna have to deal with. In those
Right.
situations, especially when you highly suspect, I think it's prudent to have this disaster, awareness ahead of time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would say in terms of what you can do to prepare, which tools, I would say, again, first and foremost, don't forget that pausing, breathing,
Hmm.
trying to say a quick prayer if you can. And I love your idea too, Anne. Prepare those few little things that you can say, like, having the words so you can just rote memorization, say it. Actually, I think that was a
Right.
really great addition to what I was already thinking. So that way you don't have to think on the spot, because right then when the emotions are flooding in, the part of your brain that is logic based is actually the amount of brain activity is going down, and then your instinctual side is actually going up. So brain scans show that. So if you are truly getting flooded with emotions, you're going to have trouble thinking that through. What do I say? What do I do?
Right.
So honestly, I think that might be one of the best things you can do, because the pausing part is to buy you a little bit more time so you can do that. But if you could do it ahead of time, then you can just say it. You can just say what you intend to say. I'm so happy for you, best wishes to you in your pregnancy, or, just choosing not to say something when someone asks, do you have, like something really insensitive.
Yeah, and one of our contributors had also just mentioned that something that helps her is to have kind of an ally, maybe an ally at work.
Mm,
Maybe there's a coworker that you have a good relationship with, and is someone you can share this struggle with if you feel comfortable. Maybe you've had those conversations, and that's someone you can kind of lean on when these kinds of announcements come up. And then also, I think it's important for us to lean on our spouse. um, and maybe have these conversations ahead of time, with our husband or with our wife, and so that they're kind of also prepared to offer us that emotional support.
absolutely. Absolutely. Having someone to process this with. Also, I think just in general, too, I think we can be proactive if we're trying to sift through our emotions, sift through how infertility is impacting us ahead of time. And like, unfortunately, these emotions, sometimes as unpleasant as they are, they don't just go away with if we just suppress them and put them away.
Right.
So, unfortunately, what ends up happening, and why I encourage my clients to proactively engage in their emotions in a safe environment, in an environment where they can let them out and not be worried about the ramifications, that can help bring relief. It can help them. So that way, then those emotions aren't as raw or as intense. Because unfortunately, these times come, and they often comes in on inopportune times. So if you can deal with that proactively, there's going to be less of that built up steam in there. So that way, then when that comes, maybe a little bit less intensity, rawness will come up when you have to deal with a trigger like this. So
Yeah, I love that. And I guess this idea too that, we need to be realistic, that we can prepare all we want, but it doesn't mean that when it comes, we're just going to be kind of stone faced and it's not going to phase us. But I
no,
think you're right. If we sort of, yeah, put together our little disaster kit, and gather that support around us, that's going to, I think, go a long way toward helping us to manage these emotions and kind of weather those announcements when they come. One of the things that comes up sometimes within our community is, okay, I'm regulating my emotions, and I'm doing what I can to be prepared. But sometimes I'm in a work situation maybe where there are a number of pregnancy announcements, that are coming, in the course of a couple of months, and it can get really difficult. It almost feels like, you're on the beach and you just keep getting pounded and pounded by the waves, and you can't really get your footing. So I don't know. There might not be a good answer to this, but I wonder if there's any way that we can maybe talk to our coworkers, that's really hard to do. But I wonder if you might have some suggestions about how maybe we can express what's going on with us without having to, reveal our entire story. But to maybe makes the people around us a little bit more aware. And just as we have to try to cultivate generosity when we hear these announcements, maybe to help those around us to be a little bit more sensitive. I know this is really tricky.
It is. It is. We'll try our best, but it's a work in progress. And I love your comment too, Ian, about we're human.
Yeah.
We're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times when we, as best as we try to keep our emotions in check, they're going to run their course. They're going to do their thing. Sometimes we're going to choke up. Sometimes we're going to say something that we regret later. But I think it's always an option, if it makes sense for your situation, that you can go back and repair that with that person. Once you have regained your composure, once you have gotten your prefrontal cortex back online, you can go back to that person and say, hey, I'm so sorry that I said that. I regret that. Here's kind of what was going on. It doesn't excuse what I said, but here's what was going on in my world, and I just want to share that with you. Or, hey, thank you for being patient with me. I am truly happy for you. I know in that moment I cried, I teared up. I am truly happy for you, and I don't want my own emotions, which are coming from my own experience, to take away from my support for you. So again, just kind of, you can go back and tidy that up retrospectively sometimes. So
Yeah, I love that. I think that, when we're able to be, even a little bit vulnerable and honest, it can even, kind of make our relationships a little bit closer. And I like that use of the word repairing, that there's some sense of sort of reconciliation and perhaps now a greater understanding on the part of that coworker and, in other situations. I find, at least for myself, that whether it's this cross or any suffering that we carry, if we kind of lean into it, it can end up really transforming us and helping us to be more compassionate and empathetic to other people. That's not
mhm.
always easy because suffering is hard, but I think it's kind of one of the gifts that God really provides through suffering. So, yeah, I mean, there's no easy answers, and there's no sort of one way. We try to kind of make our way through it the best that we can.
Right, right. And so when we do have those conversations where maybe now we're flipping it around and now talking about what that person said or did, or what is the work environment doing for us and how is that hurting us? I think, as with all communication, when you're dealing with a very sensitive topic, you want to come in with as a gentle approach as possible. Being very careful and intentional, and maybe planning ahead, thinking through kind of what you want to say and how can I say in a gentle way. So, for example, if someone brings up the insensitive, do you have kids? Comments,
Right.
or in that kind of a situation, in the moment you don't say anything, you're just like, no, not really, or I hope we will someday, or something like that. And if you wanted to address that situation, you could go back and say, hey, when you said, when you asked me this question, I know that
Mhm.
it was coming out of a place of genuine interest or genuine care. Yeah, but when it came across to me, I wasn't prepared for that answer. Actually, in here, I want to let you know that I'm actually dealing with infertility. This is actually a painful point for me. I'm not always prepared for those kind of questions. And so I'm sorry, that I choked up and whatnot, but that's how that makes me feel. So I just wanted to let you know that, so you can be aware of that, that's just a sensitive topic for me. But I could see too, if you're talking workplace related stuff and you're referencing like a bigger, more environmental situation, and where perhaps it's not just one particular comment or one particular person, but perhaps the environment is making you feel uncomfortable. I mean, as long as provided that there's enough trust and You feel safe enough in order to express yourself maybe to your supervisor or your managers, or whomever is responsible in that situation. You could, again, in a gentle way as possible, try to broach that and say, when we do these kind of events, here's how this, when this happens, this is how it makes me feel. What I'm doing here is I'm emphasizing event, precipitating event, plus
Yes.
how I react emotionally. It makes me feel excluded. It makes me feel, devastated because it reminds me of my infertility, and so I think if you can kind of frame it in that way, rather than you guys always,
Right.
have these pregnancy related events, you guys never include us that don't have kids.
Right.
Like, it's like, yes, that's true, but that's not the way that the person needs to hear it. So they're more likely to become defensive if you put it that way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I, yeah, I love that. And as you were speaking, I mean, this is something I want to invite our listeners to really think about, and email us or drop us a line on social media, because um, perhaps we can together as a community kind of come up with some really productive and creative ways to have this kind of conversation. And rather than kind of saying to the boss, this is how I feel, so and then kind of throwing our hands up like, okay, boss, now you solve it. But maybe we can, as a community, we can think about really constructive ways to manage these situations, and not to say, I feel sad, so please don't allow these announcements anymore. Because, of course, sharing good news like this is a wonderful thing. But maybe we can think about ways that can allow for sharing it, this kind of news, but with a particular kind of sensitivity. So I want to throw that out to our listeners. Let's get creative here. We talk about fruitfulness. Let's be fruitful together, and maybe try to come up with some creative solutions, that we can offer in the workplace as well. So, Edward, we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to get to one final piece that I think is really important as we talk about our work, and that is, kind of our view of the work that we do. We oftentimes maybe don't think about our work as being creative. Perhaps some of us are, in fields that are particularly creative, but for the most part, I think we can, we just kind of think about, oh, this is our job, and we go to it every day. Um, but I wonder, kind of a two-part question, how we can begin to look at our work as being something that supports our family. And, again, that can sometimes feel strange to us if we don't have any children, because we might think, well, yeah, we're married, but we can come to sort of feel like, well, we're, two people who live in the same house and we got to pay bills. We don't think of it as our work as supporting our family. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about some of the ways that we can think more about keeping our home together, sort of being homemakers as husband and wife, and then how we might be able to better appreciate our work, and how it really does, provide for our family, and, kind of provide for our marriage as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I think most fundamentally what comes to my mind is that how important it is to be present in our marriage, present in our life here and now, present in our careers here and now. It's completely natural and understandable that we get kind of swept away with the infertility sometimes, or we're really focused, depending on what stage we're at in trying to grow our families, that we can be very intensely focused on future dates or past events and not
Right.
being in the present moment. So with this, I think try to reorient ourselves back to the present moment. How can I improve, my marriage? How can we reconnect? How can we increase, the spark, the romance that, we experienced before all of this? And then, same with our homes, with our careers. How can I be back in the present moment, during our jobs? Like, are we ruminating about infertility all day long? Are we thinking about the next appointment that we need to make, with the OB or with the surgeon or the dietitian? Are we really thinking about that recent pregnancy announcement? Again, there's a time and a place for these things, but is it taking us away, or is it not allowing us to recommit to the present moment? So I think intentionality is really key. I think intentionality is really key to kind of bring us back to the present moment. I will say too, though, like that could help, and that could help reinvigorate our careers, reinvigorate the passion that we could have if we remember that, hey, like there still is joy to be had here, there's still peace to be had here, even though maybe I envisioned this would look different. Perhaps I've heard this before, where people are like, I've been putting my career on hold because I've been waiting for that pregnancy test to come through, and so I've put everything on hold. And so it's a new invitation to say, we don't know what the future is going to have for you, but what do you want to do for right now? Would you like to take that advancement opportunity? Knowing that, okay, if a baby does come along at some point, okay, like you can reassess. But for now, do you want to start living that part of your life again? Or is it a time to reassess? Is this, I've changed, my perceptions, my worldview has changed because of my experience with infertility. Does this still, the career still align with my values, with my passions, or would something else better serve me? So, anyways, again, all that to say, I think we need to come back to the present moment, come back and look at everything intentionally and say, how can I get the most out of this? Given that, obviously we still have that big issue, that big void that we're still dealing with over here with infertility.
I love all of that. It's so helpful. And, we all have hopes and dreams, and it's good to have those. And we all, try to plan things. It's good to be a planner, but I think sometimes we can put ourselves sort of in boxes, right? And we think like, this is what I expect for my life. And, I can't move to the right or to the left until that box is filled. And then, that can really end up sort of sapping us of joy and spontaneity. And I really liked that you talked about this idea of not putting our lives kind of on hold. And also, I think what was really important is that it's okay for us to kind of reevaluate where we are, to look at where we are now, and and to maybe take a different turn than the way we expected, and that it's okay, and in fact it's really good to do that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, our situations are constantly changing and our needs are changing. And sometimes we don't realize how far we've drifted away,
Yeah.
right? I think without that intentionality, sometimes the next thing you know, you're like, what happened for the last year, 2 years? Where did that go? Oh my goodness, like where am I at with my marriage? Or oh my goodness, I've never decorated that room because I always intended it to be a nursery. And
Right.
now I'm not enjoying that space at all. And it's only a source of pain for me. So again, all that to say is it's easy to drift away, but once we become aware, once it's entered back into our consciousness, then it's okay. What do I want to do with the present moment now? I can't get that time back necessarily. I can't, change the past, but I can definitely change the present and then future outcomes.
I love that. I think that's a great place for us to end this conversation. Although I think we could go on and talk about so much more, but this has really been great. The upshot is that together with our spouse, we're on the same team. God is on our team too, and we just, as you said, we need to be present to each other, and what we're ultimately working for is heaven together, right? So, yeah, this has been a great conversation. And again, I just want to invite our listeners to share with us any creative ideas that you have about how you manage things in your workplace, or how you are keeping your home together. Edward, thanks so much for being with us.
It's a great pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you, listeners, for being with us. Just remember that we are with you. We love you so much, and we will see you next time.